Kia ora, everybody. We're sitting down with a bit of an Aussie legend, really. Ray Kelly works in the strength and conditioning field, but that definitely doesn't define him, and so absolutely personifies what we're about on the Stag, or someone that's got a broad range of interests, knowledge, and doesn't stop learning. So, Ray, what have you been doing this weekend? It's been arduous.
Yeah, well, I got back from remote New South Wales on Thursday, and then I've just been painting a house the last couple of days, and then heading to Sydney to help paint another house. I got dragged in, and then sort of into work for a couple of days, and then back out remote again.
Nice. And you said you got the motorbike in the garage. What did you plan to do with it?
Mate, I've got a beautiful heritage. I've got a beautiful Fat Boy loan, and it's all customized. And yeah, mate, it's a ripper. It's nice. And I live on the coast, and there's this water, there's lakes, and there's beaches everywhere. So you just right along the coast. There's roads everywhere that are just beautiful to cruise.
Nice. And so whereabouts are you, I guess, based when you're not in the remote lands?
Yeah, I'm based on the Central Coast. I mainly work in Sydney and Newcastle when I'm sort of in the sort of bricks and mortar side of things, but because we do a lot of online work. But yeah, Central Coast, I love it here. I'm from the bush originally, but it's a beautiful spot.
Nice. So I guess that leads us in. Who is Ray Kelly today?
Ray Kelly today, well, yeah, very different to the Ray Kelly of 27 years ago. And I guess you'd have to go back there to really understand. Prior to that, I left school at 16 and pretty much became a labourer and trades assistant in construction and things like that. It took me a number of years to get a passion for something, but I soon learned that you could work in gyms and wear white and hang around girls all day. So that was a big selling point for me. And so, yeah, 1991, I started picking up weights for free in a local gym that was only open 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. So I was actually painting houses during the day, hence the painting nowadays. They dragged me in. But yeah, so and started off like that, and then sort of went to Tamworth for a few years, and then got to Sydney. And within months, I was with Institute of Sport and sort of preparing athletes for world championship events. And then sort of after a couple of years, after 7 years in the industry, I did my first degree, which was an exercise science degree. And then sort of another 5 years later, about 8 years later, I did a master's in education. So I'm a qualified PE teacher as well, secondary PE teacher, and now doing my master's in research in the remission of type 2 diabetes and going on to a PhD in that. But, you know, along the way, it was, prepared athletes for the Atlanta Olympics of 96 and the Sydney Olympics of 2000, sort of moved more into health after that, away from sport. But with the sport side of things, trained about 11 world champion fighters, primarily boxing, but some of the UFC guys here and there, kickboxing as well. Worked on The Contender, the reality boxing show here on Fox 8, and trained 2 winners from 2 attempts on The Biggest Loser. So when they go home, they're allocated a trainer. So the first years I sort of had one guy, and each year my guy won. So anyway, look, there's lots of stuff that I've done over the years. I'm just one of those guys, I just put my hand up and say, yeah, I think I can do that. But it's not how I was raised. It's not who I was when I was 16 and left school. The thought of going to university would have just made my eyes glazed over. And if I would have understood just how much physics and chemistry was in a sports science degree, I never would have went in the first place. It would have scared me away. But these days, yeah, we do a lot of work in remote New South Wales. We're reversing diabetes, so getting people reduced medication, off medication, but yeah, blood pressure as well as insulin.
Mate, that's epic. You said there that you sort of very quickly went from picking up weights to working at the AIS, and you hadn't done any formal education yet. What do you think was key to that rapid rise?
Mate, it's quite interesting actually. It was New South Wales Institute I was involved with here in Sydney, but the structure's under the same thing. But I collected, once I started working in gyms, I started collecting programs, and I've still got them stored away 27 years on. So when someone came in, especially an elite athlete, I'd ask them if I could get a copy of their program. Back then, everything was on paper, so they weren't using apps or anything. They'd have their workout, so it could have been from the Queensland Rugby League comp or the NRL. And I've lived in really good areas for athlete development. So, a lot of country guys go on and represent Australia in a number of sports. So I had access to quite a few. And so I would just ask questions and try and work it out. And then I got hold of a book by a legend in periodization called Tudor Bomper. Mate, it opened my eyes. It took me probably, I used to have to read the paragraphs over and over again because I just couldn't quite get my head around this whole sports science speak. But I did. I ended up working out how to periodize, and that's probably one of my strengths now in planning, which is why my patients get very, very good weight loss as well. But when I got to Sydney, I started sort of working at a gym, and one of the guys was a coach with the institute, and he'd said that we got talking on periodization, and I started talking about my beliefs, which was Tudor Bomper's beliefs. And he said, our head coach is trying to talk to us about all this, but we don't understand this format. And the coach was from East Germany originally, dual gold medalist from there. So he'd come through that structure under Bomper and all that. So he introduced me, and I understood what he was trying to do. So I took over the cross-training side of things.
Awesome. And you said you picked up a book after leaving school at 16. What do you think was the switch from, hey, I can't be bothered with the schooling stuff, to sitting down and reading a book and not just, going through it, having to read over and over and over again? How do you think your mentality changed?
Look, I think I just was passionate. I just wanted to learn more, and I really, and this was before I even went to uni, because when I went to uni, I thought I knew a fair bit. I had the tracksuits to prove it, with all the rep teams and all that sort of stuff as a trainer. And I walked into uni thinking, yeah, I know a fair bit. And I walked out of uni, I graduated in 2002, and ever since that day, I still know I've got so much to learn. Don't get me wrong, I know a fair bit, and I know a fair bit more than most, but I've still got so much to learn as well. There's just, you could just pick one little part, whether it's disease, nutrition, exercise, all parts of health. There's so much we don't know, and I mean everyone in this world.
Nice. It's that the more you know, the more you realise you don't know. And
that's very true.
After Joe Rogan's little debate the other day with Chris Kresser and Joel Kahn, Sean Baker, the carnivore guy who we've had on before, sort of looked at it and said, when it comes to nutrition, we've got a 10,000 piece puzzle and we've got about 10 pieces of it, and we're trying to go, here's the picture.
Yeah. And the really frustrating part of the whole nutrition side of things, because I've had to move into that. So with my company, we train staff on how to provide programs. So we train them on nutrition and exercise and disease and all that, and medications to some extent as well, and effects. So, but the frustrating thing with nutrition is that it seems to be pushed forward as signed, sealed, and delivered. We know the facts. We know this is the best way to do it. It is so not true. And not only is it not true, it flies in the face of the whole premise of research. The whole premise of research is to prove yourself wrong, so you can get better. And that's exactly what we do with our program. Is we're always trying to work out, okay, so why can't people adhere to it, or what do people complain about, and how do we work out how to get around that so that more people aren't feeling that way. And that's exactly the attitude you got to have. Not, oh no, we know what we're doing, and then just watch disease build and build and build. No, we know what we're doing. They're just not following it. So why aren't they following it? It's not rocket science,
Yeah. And is that what's quite good with working with the community you do? You build a real relationship and find out what's ticking about each individual?
Yeah, look, I always keep my finger on the pulse. So as my career's grown, I've always seen patients, like I always will, because I think that's the only way to really know how the program's going. You can't rely on staff to transfer that information because it's very individual for each person, and the way they communicate it is very, very important as well. Yeah, no, look, I love it. I just spoke recently, just last weekend, at a conference on obstacles and opportunities in Aboriginal health. And I'm sure that a lot of people turned up thinking I was going to talk about the community, like about problems with alcohol, social issues, and all these other myths that go in there. But I was saying that there's two main obstacles when it comes to Aboriginal health, and this is health in general. The system, it's not designed for success. The health system itself, it's designed for diagnosis and prescription, and that's not the fault of the doctors or the nurses or any, that's not their fault at all. This is just the system itself, and the workers, the health workers. So we've got some amazing health workers who are always learning and adapting and so on. But then we've got others who just sort of Bundy on, Bundy off. It's not really their passion. They're just there for the paycheck, and they're not really interested in learning. They just want to do what they do. They learnt what they did previously, and they're going to stick to that. And they're just passengers.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that goes on to what you're doing, and that's continually learning and realizing that there's always something to learn, isn't it?
The best thing I ever did, I started traveling a number of years ago, probably about 8 years ago, to the major international conferences. So the European Congress on Obesity and the International Congress on Obesity. And you get to meet all the top researchers that you've been citing through your research, and just being able to bounce ideas off them and get feedback on what you're doing, and then find out what they're doing, and even talk about their past research and sort of say, well, you found this, but why didn't this happen, or why do you think this happened? That sort of information is invaluable, like you can't put a price on that sort of thing. So that's why I'm so confident in what I do. I know the direction of the industry. I know the way it's going. And our results speak for itself for that way.
Nice, mate. And so we're talking on Friday about specifically one of your diabetes patients. Can you share that 2 week? Was it 2 weeks you said they're off insulin or something like that?
Oh, right. Yeah, that was Auntie Margot. Yeah, so Margot, it's just amazing. She let us film her. So we sort of went out to launch the program in Burke, and we let the community know. And to give you an idea, we had 40 people turn up just at the drop of a hat. So that shows you how easy it is to get community involved. It's like these stories about, people don't turn up. No, they don't turn up because you've got nothing to offer, nothing different. People are sick of just getting a T-shirt, a cap, and a brochure and sent on their way. They don't want that. They want results. So they'd heard a bit about my program, and Auntie Margot turned up, and she was a shell of a person. She was telling us about her 30 years as a diabetic. She was 59, but just how overwhelmed she was. She'd been on insulin for 20 years, 4 to 5 injections a day. She's on Genumet as well, which is a combination therapy drug as well. Seeing kidney specialists, heart specialists, all the normal stuff of a 59-year-old Aboriginal woman these days. Non-drinker, doesn't eat that badly, but obviously something wasn't right. She slept all day. She retired at 58 because she just was tired all the time. She worked in the local school, and she just couldn't, and she'd done that for many years. And a university graduate, by the way, too. So educated lady, just couldn't get her diabetes under control. And she started crying, even on camera, just saying, I'm just overwhelmed with this disease. I don't understand insulin. I don't understand carbs. And this is a woman who's been through our system for 20 years. 30 years as a diabetic, but 20 years on insulin, and still did not understand it. And the amount of health specialists she would have seen over that time. And I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying it's the system itself. Anyway, long story short, she decided to sign up to the program. And by this, she was also in the process of buying a motor scooter to get around town. She couldn't walk up steps. She had a ramp put in at home, but had trouble getting around. Depressed, the whole bit. Anyway, she starts the program. Within 2 weeks, she's walking 4 kilometers every morning. She's reduced her insulin by 80% by that point, and just couldn't believe the energy. So much energy. And then in 7 weeks, she's off insulin altogether. And this was my decision. This was her doctor. Her body forced her to go off insulin. So that was the thing. Some people can't get their head around it. I quite often get asked by health professionals, how does a doctor feel, when your patients have got to go off insulin, like it's going to be an issue? Like, I've never met an unhappy doctor for that yet. Like they want that. That's the whole idea of having a lifestyle intervention, is to reduce medications. It should be the first thing. It's always in the textbooks as the first things, but it's not the way it is in our system. It's just advice. So lose weight. Anyway, another 6 weeks after that, she came off Genumin. So now she's just on metformin, which is your entry-level drug that she would have started on 30 years ago. So she does we've got a little park session, like outdoor exercise area in Burke, and she does a 4K walk, and then she does a little 20-minute circuit I've designed for her, which includes a bit of shuffle running and everything. And a lot of people would sort of look at that and think, oh, and a kidney specialist doesn't need to see her again, so she's all fine with that as well. But a lot of people would say, oh, she must have lost a lot of weight. She lost like 8 kilos. That's it. And that's the thing, like, it doesn't take a lot of weight loss. We do big weight loss, but it doesn't always, especially in the Aboriginal community, it doesn't take a lot of weight loss to see very, very good improvements.
Nice. And I'm always going on about the Verta Health study because that's out there. And it's that first 6 weeks before people have even lost weight that the results come in. And then, like you say, it gives them freedom to then do the exercise, do more, have better energy, have a better way of life, and then in comes the motivation to stick at it. That's one of the things you always hear. And the second Joe Rogan debate was with I think his name's Lane Norton, and he was always going on about sustainability of diet. But
has it been on? Has it?
Yeah,
has that one been on?
It was on. Yeah, he kind of took over the show, but it was his prerogative, I guess. But yeah, sustainability and what makes it sustainable. And like you say, if we start seeing results like that and getting off medication, and I was reading, it's called, his name's David Unwin, the diabetes.uk. They did a similar intervention, same idea. They had 19 people, 18 went through it, 16 of them reversed their markers, and the other 2, they lost a ton of weight too, but reversed their markers. Lots of them came off the blood pressure. And so how exciting is it, mate, to, like I said, to have a lady in tears to then be living a life like that? What does that do for you?
I'm getting goosebumps talking to you, mate. Look, this happens all the time, and she's not the only one, too. So we've got other people who have in that same program that have done something similar. Look, it's great. I mean, even one lady coming off insulin in 7 days, and she was a board member of the local medical service. So, look, it's 27 years I've been doing it. I don't get sick of it. Like, it's just 2 nights ago, I was sent a photo of a patient from one of my past programs who had run into 2 people who were on my current program, and they took a selfie, the 3 of them together, smiling. I've lost this, I've lost this, I've lost this, and I was just kicking back at night, just sort of tired after my day of painting, and just to get messages like that, just out of the blue. That's what I love. And that's what's good about social media. Just get tagged in a picture all of a sudden, and you just go, oh, wow, like, it's a good job. It's a good job. This is the way it's all going. You talk about Lane, like I've had a few words with him online a bit, because like, he's pretty passionate about carbs. Look, I believe people can be healthy with carbs. There's no doubt about it. But when it comes to diabetes, man, look, just go out in the community. It's whether it's the carbs themselves or whether it's the fact that they can't stop eating them once they start eating them. Look, there's no doubt that people with type 2 diabetes perform better on less carbs. That's for sure. I was just at Austria recently, and Professor, I can't believe I've just gone blank. Oh my goodness. I'll think of his name.
Where's he from?
He's from Sweden, but I've just gone blank. He's one of the leading researchers in health over the last, 20 odd years, 30 years. And he's helped set up a lot of the guidelines. And he came out and said, now that for what they know now, they realize that, some patients diabetics do perform better on lower carbs. They're going to go back over their past research to see if they've missed anything. So, this is the direction it's all going. And if you check out the direct trial in the UK, which is by Professor Mike Lean, they've got a good study going where they should be releasing their 3-year follow-up very soon. They've done their 1-year follow-up, but basically it's the first ever trial in primary care, so in medical centres, where remission is actually the outcome measured. So it just hasn't been done before. Like, it's accepted it can be done, but there's been no research around it. So what they found was, I think it was those who lost 15 kilos or more, they 85% went in remission. And if those who lost 10 kilos or more, 75%, and those who lost at least 5 kilos, 50%. And that, what they did, they had patients who were on just oral medication, but they took them off all their blood pressure and all their diabetes medication. They had to have been diagnosed within the past 3 years. And they showed that, that was very, very effective. They used a shakes component, so meal replacement shakes first, so 800 calories, and then moved on to a transition into food and so on. So different formats suit different people, but yeah, that was good. And then you've got Dr. Shaghuli from Kuwait, who's been doing some great work on people on multiple doses of insulin. So she works with patients who can't control their blood sugars too well, even on multiple doses of insulin. And the results she gets, and that's the average, I think, is 23 years as a diabetic. So some people would look at Mike Lean's research and say, oh yeah, but that's within 3 years, that's different. It's not. Like, beta cells in the pancreas can be replenished or rejuvenated many, many years later. And that's what we've seen with Margot and many of our patients here as well.
Wow. No, that's pretty awesome. And like you said, going back to the Australian system, I was under the impression in New Zealand that we weren't doing a great job. But since coming here, and I don't know if it's because where I go into casinos semi-rural or wider, but haven't had too many type 2 diabetics that are just on metformin. A lot of them have thrown it away, and a ton of them are on insulin, and they're not even on a controlled level of insulin. It's this dose in the morning, this dose at night, and I'm going, well, what's that even based on? And barely any of them know what HbA1c is, let alone what it actually is. And I just go, well, what's going on here? So I've been writing letters mentioning the little bit of research, and having known the Gary Feckney story, been doing it quite nervously. But luckily, Friday, the day that we talked, it's come out that APRA's apologised to him, and it appears that now, as health professionals under APRA, we are allowed to suggest dietary interventions to save our patients. So how has it been from being part of it to not just witnessing it and then joining it and going, am I doing the right thing? How's it been being a part of it and having this alternative view?
Yeah, it's a fine line. So basically, I started working this way in 2006, and I sort of was starting to think that maybe I'm in the wrong profession, because I was following what I was taught, and it just didn't work. It doesn't work really for the majority. You'll get some good results here and there, but it just wasn't working. So I was pretty disillusioned with the whole career in the weight loss side of things and stuff. So, but I then started reading the research for myself, and once I started reading, you just go, oh, wait up. Like, it actually says this, and this is what I was taught. So that's when I started having my eyes open to what was out there. And that's why I always take on board anyone, even, you spoke about Lane before, and I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but there's no doubt he's got some good points. And that's how you've got to go into these discussions, is you need to be taking on everyone's perspective, because there's no one size fits all. And you're going to find some patients that are going to work really well on a higher carb diet compared to a lower carb, but majority are going to be different to that, it's been fantastic. But the reason why I felt sort of forced into it, because it was like, how can you, when you see the results, when you start playing around with it and seeing what can be done, and you see the results, you can't unsee it. You couldn't ever go back to the old way and just go, oh, well, this is what we're going to do. You can't do that. And yeah, it's been good. And I think a lot of people don't realize just how important that APRA overturn is, an apology, how important that is to Australian health. It's crucial that there is transparency in all this, but not only that, like, Gary is a doctor, and if he can't provide advice, then who can? Like, don't start believing that dietitians are the only people that can, because don't get me wrong, we've got some amazing dietitians in this country. We've got some amazing dietitians, but like in all industries, we've got some that work better than others. So we can't just blanket everyone as being, oh no, they've done that degree, they're the experts. Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no, it was pretty bizarre story, and many of the comments on Twitter was, I tell my patients about this all the time, and they're just so confused that there was an issue, and Gary's spoken to Sean Baker, and they're both sort of in the same boat. Like, what did we do wrong? We were saving people's health. I know.
That's the crazy thing. But I've had pharmacists saying to me, so when people come off insulin, what do they do with the insulin they got? And I said, throw it out. And I said, no, you can't do that. Well, if they don't need it, what are they going to do with it? You want them to donate it. You're like, but they think it's just crazy to take people off insulin. I've had a director for a whole area health service, so looks after many, many hospitals, say to me, so doctors are okay taking patients off insulin? That's like someone very high up in the area, and they're not seeing it. And it's accepted in research, absolutely accepted in research. All doctors would agree. But that's not what it's like at the coalface. So that's why the education comes in, and like, there's no judgments or anything like that. It's just purely, you've got to get to a stage where you accept that what's been going on hasn't worked. We know it hasn't worked. Like the Grattan report from 2016 showed that it was a chronic failure in primary care. If you want to check that out, that showed that less than 50% of all type 2 diabetics that are seen in primary care, so that's all the medical centres across the country, less than 50% achieve a HbA1c under 7. Less than 50%. Now, it is not that difficult to get people under 7. It's not difficult at all. But less than 50% can do that. And that's with all the endocrinologists and dietitians and physiologists, insulins, oral tablets. That's all of that included.
No, it's that's brings me on to what I've been trying to deal with in optometry. We just had a rejig of our guidelines, and they all seemed pretty good, except for one little mention that we should be telling our patients to go on another medication, which is fenofibrate, which works in what it's planned to do, and it lowers LDL and raises HDL. So that lowers triglycerides, raises HDL. So that should be good. Which was then no more effective than the statin. That's probably not really effective anyway. And out of these two studies, they managed to find that maybe it might reduce diabetic retinopathy for someone that already has it. The need for laser for someone that already has it. And I sort of looked through it and got taken to the College of GPs of Australia, and they sort of had done an analysis, and it was 5 people in the worst group who are at the biggest risk of having complications with this medication. I was thinking, this is absolute rubbish. And the 2 studies that are looking at it go back to what you just said there, that putting people on too many medications actually increases their mortality and doesn't help them. They put on more weight, and they wonder why, like you say, that in the long run, none of this is successful, but that's the system we're in, and it makes its way into the guidelines. And you're banging your head against the wall.
No, it's true. And just recently over at the European Congress on Obesity in Vienna, there was a number of presenters discussing that thing. And I hadn't seen it discussed there before, but how important it is to reduce medications because of the effect they do have on weight. So say type 2 diabetes, and when I say reduce medications as their body needs it. So not just reducing, but if their body doesn't need it, then don't have it, sort of thing, which is what usually happens when you have a good lifestyle intervention happening. But it's not what happens. We don't see people reducing medications too often. I mean, with blood pressure, that's pretty simple because people start getting lightheaded, and that's kind of a forced thing. What often happens with type 2 diabetes, and once again, remember, the only real treatment for type 2 diabetes is weight loss. All the medications are about lowering blood glucose, but it's not going to be something that's going to turn the disease around. It just slows the progress, which is why they call it a progressive disease if you follow those guidelines. But it's as soon as someone's blood sugars start dropping and they're on insulin, what do they get told? Eat more carbs. So you've got people who aren't tolerating carbs too well, aren't processing carbs too well. They're taking insulin, which is going to store fat, and then they get told to eat more as they're progressing. So they're actually doing really, really well. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're losing weight. And as they lose weight, their blood sugars improve as well. And they get told to eat more food. And usually it's before they go to bed, because a lot of people have hypos overnight. So check your sugars before you go to bed. If they're too low, it's not, don't reduce your doses. It's, now eat more.
Yeah, that goes with what I was saying about those two patients. This dose in the morning, this dose at night. Oh, make sure you check your blood sugar and eat accordingly. And like you say then about, the treatments to do well. You see that with bariatric surgery. They get the surgery, they lose the weight, and then 5-10 years down the track, they're back to where they were. So that's where I guess your lifestyle intervention is the actual cure and treatment. The other thing is just the band-aid to help.
Yeah, nothing else works without it. And don't get me wrong, some people are well suited to bariatric surgery, although it's never ever the first step. I think sort of women, once they're over 130 and 130 kilos, or guys over 170, like you can sort of start considering. But we've had plenty of people, get their weight right down around those weights and much bigger. I think usually like average on our programs about 12 to 17 kilos in 10 weeks. And that's just with fresh food. That's no supplements, no nothing. But we get plenty of people that are more than that. We've had with the Giants program, GWS Giants have me organise their community program where we put some of their fans through our program. And the first 68 that have been through it have lost a total of 1,055 kilos in the 12 weeks of the program. And this is over the phone. So we meet them for their first weigh-in. We meet them for their last weigh-in. We do have a couple of barbecues in there just to catch up, but there's no supervised cooking sessions or exercise sessions. It's purely just, over the phone, ring them once a week, 5-10 minutes. Hey, how you going? They tell us how they're going. We give them strategies. Everything else is online via email and SMSs daily, and like automated SMSs through to maintain motivation. And it's just designed to work. So that's what it's about. We just identify obstacles and then just build things around it. And this group at the moment, we've got 32 people in this current group. And in the first 10, 11 days, they're at about 191 kilos as a group. So yeah, that'll slow down. But look, by the end, if they can average around 15 kilos, which is what most people do, then that's going to be sweet for all of them.
Absolutely. So is this being documented in some way? Is there a case report coming out of this? Or?
Yeah, well, I will be doing some research through all this sort of stuff because it does need to be. I'm currently in talks with the health department on providing their own independent report, so we can sort of look to spread it around the country a bit more. But that's going pretty well. Obviously, they're pretty impressed with the results. We get a lot of people off medication, especially blood pressure. It's probably one of the most common ones. So that's an easy one. Diabetes, that's a lot of people will come down off medication or off metformin as a drug. A lot of doctors will still like to keep people on it after their blood sugars come good, just because it's a drug that can assist with maintaining weight loss, I feel. So, sometimes people won't come off metformin unless they actually ask and say, yeah, look, I don't want to take it anymore. But, the results are all there. Like it's proven,
So, yeah, what sort of got you motivated to get into the master's research? Did someone tap you on the shoulder, or?
Actually, I'd always wanted to, but I just don't have time. I've got 5 kids as well, by the way. So young kids, and, I'm very heavily involved in their school and all that sort of stuff as well, balancing it all out. But yeah, my course coordinator for my master's in education was always in my ear about I should be doing research. She wanted me to go along the lines of role modeling for teenage kids, because I had a bit of a rough upbringing and turned my life around, all that sort of stuff. So I've got a good story to tell with that, and she thought that would be a good area to study. But I just felt dry. I felt I had to do diabetes because just does my head in. Just the quality of information that's available to patients. There's a lot of information, but there's not a lot that people can comprehend. And just in some of our research we've done already, patients are the most common theme is I get told things, but I don't understand it. That's it. That's in a nutshell what a lot of people struggle with. So yeah, they get these plates and they get these leaflets and they go and see the dietitian, the physiologist, and all that, but they don't understand it. They don't comprehend it. Like they just nod their head and go and do their best.
Yeah, and that's why when I asked them a question about it, they're like, not sure, sorry.
That's it. And so with our program, it's all based around education, but education without them feeling like they're sitting in a classroom. So there's little things. The most common theme is that people bring up is that Ray gets inside your head. And we have these videos at 7 a.m. every morning. And they're just 30, 90-second video. And I just speak straight to them, like I just call it all, and just let them know that, well, you're bullshitting to yourself, or that's common. Don't worry about that. You just keep pushing through. You're going to get those thoughts. You're going to feel like doing this. That's all cool. So it gives people that confidence, because when it comes to lifestyle change, confidence is everything. That's what gets you through in those tough times. Late at night watching TV, sitting there going, "I'm hungry." No, I'm not really hungry. I'm just bored.
Yeah. Do you guys, what sort of tools do you get access to? Is there a push to have continuous glucose meters or anything like that, or are they even measuring their blood glucose?
Yeah, I would love to have more glucose monitors. We're just getting a nurse practitioner out some of the remote programs soon. Well, hopefully within the next few weeks, and that will be involved. I like using them for myself just to test, and they provide such great feedback. But cost and all that sort of stuff. But I think for any patient that's on insulin, I think they should be utilizing those sort of tools. I think it gives them good real-time feedback these days, through apps or just waving and all that with the implants and stuff like that. But yeah, they're not being utilized a lot. Most of our patients will just do the finger prick test most mornings. That's the main one I'd like is first thing in the morning. But they'll also usually do it before they go to bed, especially if they're on insulin. Then we do HbA1c at the start of the program and at the end of the program as well.
So how long's the program?
Usually 10 weeks. So with the Giants program, we did a couple of 12-weekers, but it's primarily 10 weeks.
Nice.
That's the program itself. Yeah, that's the program itself, but we teach skills on how to keep progressing forward or how to maintain.
And are they dealing this as a group or sort of one-on-one, or do they, like you said, you had a couple of barbecues, but those involved in the program, do they get together much? And
not really. The Giants one, we do the barbecue, but with the remote programs, it's just in the country towns. They'll just come in. Sometimes there might be a couple of family members doing it together, but pretty much they do it on their own. Some of them have organised their own walking groups and things like that, so they're very important. But in general, no, it's all about taking responsibility. That's what we teach people: take responsibility. It's not about who's to blame or anything like that. It's just this is what's happening right now. How do you fix it? You're responsible for your own body, so do what needs to be done.
No, so I saw on your website you've got sort of a way of approaching problems that you probably touched on it right then. Here is the problem, and here's our steps that we need to take to get to the solution. Where does that come from?
I think my planning background, like I said, I was designing athlete programs for the course of 4 years at a time sometimes. So for development programs, and planning's everything. You don't have to follow the plan to the letter, but it works as a very good guide. And that's probably what I learned best about dealing with athletes. So I brought that across to lifestyle interventions. So everything's planned out to the nth degree and analysed and reevaluated a couple of times a year. You know, I'll have ideas mulling over sometimes for 6 months before I go, no, okay, that can actually fit in the program. I can do that, because the main thing about the program is it has to be easy to understand. That's the trick. And that's probably the thing I sit back sometimes and think people just would not appreciate, like, because you'd look at the program and you go, oh yeah, it makes sense. But there's so much thought. So it's not only what's in there, it's what's not in there. And it's when things are entered in and the language around it that's used. And it's just been a lot of work. Yeah, it's been a lot of work. But yeah, that's why, you know, it works really well.
Nice, mate. So you mentioned that you came from a bit of a tough upbringing. What's the story there, man?
Well, anyone that's from Sydney knows Mount Druitt. So I'm originally from Tamworth area, my family, but you know, I spent the first 10 years of my life in Mount Druitt in Houso there, and well, you know, didn't have a good family life. We'll just put it that way, and probably, you know, got in trouble with the police for the first time at the age of 8, and then started, you know, smoking pot and everything at 14. So I moved up to the country at 11. And my mum and dad had divorced, and sort of went up there and just was running amok right throughout my high school years. But the crazy thing was, sport was what always kept me in. I only went to school, and I was all right at school. I was actually pretty good, but I didn't think I was. I sort of had a low self-esteem and really didn't think very highly of myself, you know, like through all the struggles that I'd had as a young kid. And so I really didn't think I was that smart, but I was really smart, actually. When I look back, I go, God, I never studied, never did assignments or anything, but blitzed everything. You know, I was always in some of the top classes across a lot of the subjects, but I never thought I was very smart. It's crazy how your mind works, you know. So anyway, long story short, you know, just left school at 16 and just really spiraled out of control with drugs and alcohol and fighting and all those sorts of things, the stupid, risky behaviours. And then basically at the age of 20, a lot of us coming down off LSD, and one bloke stabbed another bloke, and that was sitting there coming down and talking to my mates, and just going to 2 of my mates who I'm still really good mates with today, you know, just went, no, I can't keep doing this. Like, all these guys in and out of jail, and, you know, I hadn't been to jail or anything, and it was just, like, I just can't keep doing this, you know, like I had to have a go. I didn't think I could do it. And don't get me wrong, I never thought I could do anything like what I've done since. But, you know, I thought if I can just get a full-time job, yeah, that was it. That was doing anything, because there was not a lot of work around. I wasn't working. So I started off just, yeah, painting the houses. I got sort of just as a labourer with a painting crew. And so I was just sanding houses and cutting in and all that sort of stuff. So I started with that, and then one of my mates who was rebuilding a Harley for a guy who owned a local gym, a real small PCYC gym. He said, oh, look, this bloke's trying to turn his life around. Can you help him out? Because I moved away from that other town. Like, I just moved away 3 weeks later and just wanted to start from scratch. And yeah, just sort of started picking up weights in that gym. And back then you didn't just become a personal trainer, you know, like you had to sort of pick up weights for a while and learn the ropes. And that's where you learn the most, is on the floor talking to people. And I learned a lot that way. Yeah. So, you know, it was a crazy time, spiraling out of control massively. I never thought I would live to be 22. There was just so many stories I could talk about, you know, just even, you know, being held captive by a couple of drug dealers when I was 17. And I boxed at 47 kilos at that age. So I was a small bloke, and overnight they're holding my legs out, trying to jump on my legs, break my legs. And I just fought them off. And like in this house, I was locked in this house there. And yeah, I thought I was going to die that night, and I really did. But it didn't change. I just kept doing what I was doing, just, you know, got out with a few splits, a few stitches on either eye, and crazy times. It's like a lifetime ago though. But and then sort of, yeah, just I guess I kind of felt backed into a corner in the end, that I either had to really have a crack, or it was just going, you know, I'd be in jail or dead, you know, like I knew that for sure. So that's where it all started. And I just started trying to read things. I didn't have much money, so I was just trying to get books where I could and read. And there was no internet then either, so, you know, you couldn't sort of learn that way. So I was just trying to just be a sponge, just try and learn. And the more I got into it, the better it was. But even like within 6 months of being in the industry, my boss at the time was going, "Oh, mate," because I'd always talk myself down. "Oh, if I could, one day just, get a full-time job in this town, I'll be right." He goes, "Mate, I can see you being, the best in the country." Like he was saying, "Mate, you are so passionate and you've got a real gift for this." And I honestly thought he was just being a nice bloke. He probably was. He probably was, by the way. But back in 91, he was saying that to me. And I look back now and shake my head going, man, how crazy is that? And then back then, seriously, I thought if I got a full-time job in Sydney working in a gym, I've made it. And the stuff I've done since, like if I lost my job today, I wouldn't be working in a gym in Sydney, so it's crazy ride. But I never forget. All my mates will tell you, like a lot of my good friends are friends I've had since those days that turned their life around as well. We've stayed pretty solid, and look, they'll all tell you I'm pretty much the same bloke. I just don't do that stupid shit anymore. But I think that's why I'm really good with the whole research side of things. I don't just believe people. I'm a pretty street smart guy, so I don't take everything at face value. I like to think about things. I love a good debate, but a respectful debate. Like if you've got an opinion, you can't expect to put your opinion out there and not have people question it. Like who does that? You're not intelligent if you do that. Like I want people to tell me what they disagree with because I want them to try and convert me because I want to learn. You know what I mean? Like with Lane, like there's guys around who, can really improve your understanding. Because you might be looking at it from a totally different perspective, which you usually would because you've got different experiences, different life experiences. So even for you, growing up in New Zealand and myself being from Mount Druitt, or we see different things. You know what I mean? Growing up and we train under different people and we study under different people and we follow different people on social media. So there's so much we can all teach each other. And going in with, no, my way or the highway, just seriously, I don't respect people like that purely because I just don't think they're very smart. And that's, that's not to be mean. That's just because I feel that's a choice. As far as not being smart, I'm not talking about their IQ. I'm talking about being set in their ways. And you can't do that when you work in any industry.
No, that's right. And I guess that is a little bit of what you end up with the medical system is it's a little bit set in its ways, and that's why people sometimes get in trouble when they look at something a little bit different. Mate, you said there that you managed to take yourself away from it and move to another town. Do you know what drove that decision? Was that something that you knew was the case? Do you think maybe moving away from Mount Druitt was a similar thing, or?
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. Well, I kind of had a choice. My parents had broke up, and my mum had I've got a twin sister, and she'd moved away with my twin sister. And so there was 4 of us with my dad still, and I was very close with my mum. So it was only a matter of time before I went there, and I knew that I had to get out of there. Like it was crazy then. I knew that as a 10-year-old, Yeah, look, I know that back then it was through a fear. Like as in when I turned it around finally, it was a fear. I just knew where it was all going. I'd seen it with other friends, and I guess deep inside I thought I could do better. I just didn't know how. I really didn't know how. I had no clue what the first step was. And as someone who is really good at analyzing things and being a critical thinker these days, I can look back now and just, man, I was so lost, but so wanting to be helped, but didn't know how to be helped. I was still in the whole mode of blaming others for my problems. That was a big stepping stone, actually, was accepting that I've got an influence on everything that's ever happened in my life, positive and negative. So I always use the sort of explanation or the example of, like say you're going through a T intersection and someone, runs through a red light and smashes into you. Well, you've got to take some blame for that. It's not your fault because the person ran the red light, but you know, you've got to take as much care as you can. And there's some responsibility still there on you. And some people find that a bit ludicrous to be thinking like that, but it's the only way to progress forward in life. If you're blaming someone, you're never, ever moving forward, ever. You know, you're always dwelling on that. But when you accept responsibility to some extent, even the smallest, you get to grow. You get to move past it and leave that stuff behind. Probably one of the best things I've learned over the years, I think. So, yeah.
Nice. And you said you had somebody, you know, give you a hand and tell the gym owner that you're trying to turn your life around. How important was it to have someone like that? And I'm sure you've had plenty of mentors throughout the rest of your life as well that have given you a hand out.
Yeah, I have. And I guess that's one thing with research you start learning is all these successful people, no one ever does it on their own. Like, you know, like a lot of people would look at people, and the example we studied was Stephen Hawking, you know, based, you know, in a wheelchair and using others to research and all that sort of thing. He's a very intelligent man, but he'd be nowhere without the team of people that worked around him, or nowhere near where he achieved. But yeah, look, what do I owe him? You know, but it's even guys back when I was 17, and when I first left school, there was a local police boys club cop, and I was boxing back then, and he was trying to raise money to get so that I could actually go back to school, so I could fund me to go back to school. So he saw that in me then, but I didn't see it. And to tell you the truth, it's people like that who, when I was ready to change, that was what gave me confidence to give it a go, because it was scary, you know, it was crazy. Like I thought I would fail, and I didn't like failing, and that's why I didn't attempt things. You know, now I actually attempt everything that I want to, and know I'm going to fail, and accept that that's just part of the process. You know, I'm going to fail in some way. It's not going to all turn out perfect for me. I'm going to have to adjust as I go, and that's important, learning how to fail. You know, and this this cop, Paul McKittrick, who I'm still friends with on Facebook. I've been back and thanked him and everything. But, you know, when I was ready to change, it was people like him that believed in me. I didn't have a lot of people believe in me. And I thought, you know, like if this guy who is like a pillar of the community sees that in me, then there must be something. There just must be something. And like I said, my confidence was really down. I really didn't think I could do much at all. So, yeah, like between a couple of those, you know, like him and Brian Day, who had the first gym, you know, it's what you need, and that's what kids need. And that's why, you know, when I go into schools and speak in schools, and I don't charge them ever. They always say, oh, no, we got funding for this. I can't charge people for that. Like, seriously, you know, what it's done for my life, having people believe in me, you know, like if I can change people's lives, and I go and I call a spade too. I speak pretty directly. I do tell the schools I might slip out with a swear word here or there, because I just get passionate, and it's a story, you know, like you've got to get messages across. You know, I want to teach kids, you're not tough. Like, you're 15, 16. I thought I was tough then. I wasn't tough at all. God, you got nothing yet. You want to know tough. You know, you'll know it once you start hanging around, you know, some of those rough pubs and go to jail and all that. That's tough. You know, there's some tough people there. You're not tough. You know, so, and no, you don't want to be tough. God, that's just an illusion. You know what I mean? Like, guys who go around acting tough, they get killed pretty much. So, you know.
And so have you done anything to sort of unpack that period of your life and look back at the sort of traumas and things that you went through? Like one of the questions I've asked many people is, what's characteristics of a 5-year-old you that show up today? And, you know, living in a place like that, there must have been a lot of, like you said, even the decision to leave the town when you were 20 was based on fear. There must have been a lot of fear motivating you. Does that show up today anymore, or what?
No, I guess my motivation these days is very different. So there's a few things I can go through. So make sure I go back to the unpacking and everything as well. But these days, my fear is more based around not being really good at what I do, I guess. Like, I just want to be, I don't want to necessarily be the best. Like, you know, that's, yeah, what's the best? You know what I mean? Like, I just want to be really good and really effective, and certainly someone who can provide a really, really good service. And you know, like, maybe do some great research that can make an impact, across the globe and that sort of things. I've been saying for years, I want to change the world, and people would laugh, and I'm serious. I do. I want to change the way these diseases are treated, because we can do way better, but on the unpacking, like, it was probably only about 2011, 2012 that I actually talk about all that stuff I've spoken about today. So it wasn't that long. I'm 49 now. It's taken that long for me to be able to talk about it publicly. I guess I was a little embarrassed in some ways, fears of being judged in another way, but it's also just very raw, very raw. There's so many stories I could go through, and just quite personal, and I wasn't sexually abused or anything like that, but it was the stuff it was just some pretty crazy things, for a young bloke to deal with and get through. And I definitely will unpack, and I have to some extent. I actually listened to Russell Brand's podcast. I got him through Joe Rogan, actually, so I listened to him on there, and I always thought he's a pretty smart sort of guy, but I thought he's a bit goofy at times. But then I started listening to his podcast. He's a bloody intelligent bloke, I like the whole philosophy and all that sort of stuff as well. And he, I thought I'd listen to his 12 steps, and can't recommend that highly enough. God, it's a laugh. There's a lot of swearing in it, just so people know, and that'll either attract you or push you away. But it's actually really good. If you're a salt of the earth kind of person, then it's one that will be good for you to listen to. But it made me I always had in the back of my mind that I had a problem with people leaving me, like just with different things that happened in my life, and I might have had an issue with that. But after listening to his podcast, so his 12-step series, just that was the thing that jumped out at me. It wasn't that I had a problem with people leaving me. My issue was that I was more inclined to push them away if I felt that they didn't believe in me anymore. Like if they gave up on me, it was like, this was only a few weeks ago I came across this, and I went, that is probably one of the most underlying issues I have, is that people giving up on me because I try my hardest. And don't get me wrong, it's not something that eats away at me today, but if I was to have a look in my past life as a kid going through up to say even maybe 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, like if people were to start doubting what I was doing, I'd be more likely just to push them away, and just say, well, okay, get out of my life then, kind of thing. And it wasn't an arrogant thing. It was a lack of confidence thing and a lack of trust thing. It was crazy. Like, I still can't comprehend why, but it is what it is, And I mean, I understand how it got to that point, but it doesn't make sense to me as the person I am. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a pretty easygoing bloke, and I accept people's differences all, right through. And I try to get on. I try to see the positive in everyone. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to put up with crap from anyone. I'm still, I still train a lot, and I've started martial arts at the age of 4. So I'm not going to just wilt away in the back docks and sort of let people walk over me. I'm definitely not that person. I'm very easygoing, but I often say, like, I try to work with people, but if they get in my way, we just bulldoze them. So
nice, mate. The sort of self-esteem thing is something that I dealt with as well, and one of the ways to reframe it was sort of, if somebody else was telling you what they're going through, what would you sort of say to them? And you kind of look at it and go, oh, I'm being a little bit odd about that, mate. We've both just had, you especially right then, quite an honest conversation as two guys that have spoken once before. You mentioned off here that you're doing some work with the Aboriginal community out of something sad in a suicide, but saying about, it's good to talk about these sort of things. What are you doing there, man?
Yeah, well, this stems from a mate of mine, Matt Simpson, took his life earlier this year. He's an Aboriginal man, and he was a sports conditioner, up and coming, like a good-looking bloke, strapping bloke too, like, really fit. If you looked at him, you would think, mate, this guy's full of confidence. He's just the picture of health, you know, always big smiles, you know. Yeah, he sort of done some tours with some American colleges, training some athletes, and like, you know, he had the world at his feet, and yeah, just things that happened when he was younger and he struggled to deal with, and he took his own life. And it was probably about 2 weeks later, the New South Wales ESSA board, so that's Exercise and Sports Science Australia, asked me if I'd come on board as their Indigenous Projects Officer. So I'm Aboriginal. I'm from the Gomeroi area, or Kamilaroi area near Tamworth. And yeah, the crew they've got there at the moment were really motivating. They were doing a lot of work in general outside of their area. So I took it on board. I said, look, I'm pretty busy, but let's see what we can do. And first thing I put to them was something that Matt's wife, Christy, had been working on, which was a hashtag of Talk to Me Bro. And they've got a whole movement on Facebook. So chase them up, Talk to Me Bro. So it's talk, as in TALK2, letter 2, number 2, bro. Check him out on Facebook, good group. Anyway, so we got that, and then we got Richie Allen, who's one of my old mates from home, and he does a lot of traditional work down around Canberra these days. Mr. Ngunnawal on Twitter, he's got a great following there. He's a really motivating guy, but formerly played for the Roosters. We don't hold that against him. I'm a Rabbitohs man, and you know, Roosters won the grand final last night. But you know, former Roosters. Yeah, he's actually like an ex-champion footy player, and another one who we've helped go into remission for type 2 diabetes, by the way.
Awesome.
So he did the artwork, and we put these posters together, and we launched it at the recent symposium for exercise scientists in Sydney. So that'll be going out across the state. But yeah, no, really important. It's just about getting men talking about their problems. I definitely one that I'd keep things to myself a lot. I guess I was raised by a bull rider who was just a tough bloke, you know, and he just sort of dealt with things like that. But I guess for me, I need to get things right in my own head before I can communicate them. And that's what I was saying. Like, it took until, you know, just a number of years ago, 6 years ago, till I could even speak publicly about a lot of the stuff from my, junior life. So, but it is so important to talk, and there's so many great online groups. And when I went through a divorce, a few years back, I really was struggling. I had friends everywhere, you know. I mean, I know a lot of people, but it wasn't like I couldn't talk to them. I knew I had to speak to someone because I was missing my kids a lot. I was used to seeing them every day, and it was cut down quite a lot. Everything's good now, by the way. So yeah, we just about to take them out bush soon. So we've got everything going well. But during that, anyone's been through a divorce will know, like, those first 3 to 6 months are terrible. Mentally, but I jumped onto a couple of the phone in places where you could be anonymous. That was important to me. It needed to be anonymous. So I had a bit of a profile. At that stage, I was on a bit of TV, and I really didn't want anyone knowing what I was going through, because I couldn't deal with it myself. I couldn't get my head around it myself. So I just couldn't have people asking me about it and bringing it up, no matter how well intentioned. And it was great. Like, I didn't like what they said to me at times. You know, I wanted people to agree with me, not question why I was thinking that way and what it mattered. Like, the best thing it was, well, why does it matter? You know, because I didn't understand the situation. Well, if you understood, what would it change? It was pretty true, you know. Like, at the time, I hated it. I was going, did you guys get paid to say this? I wasn't happy at all. I wanted people to feel sorry for me. No, but it was like, yeah, it was bloody good advice. You know, it took me a few days to get my head around it, but yeah, I sort of was shaking my head afterwards going, they're good. But, so yeah, it's just so important to talk. And like I said, I've got some really good friends that I could have just phoned up, but I just couldn't talk to them about those things at that point. They were too involved. You know what I mean? They knew all parties, and I knew they were pretty solid with me. They're good friends, but yeah, look, it just wasn't something that worked. That's why, like, sometimes speaking to your physiologist or your optometrist, or, you know, it can help, you know, and you just got to have that good connection with people.
Beautiful, mate. So if people want to track you down and track down what you do, where can they find it?
Yeah, mate. Look, I'm over all the social media. So, yeah, Insta, Twitter and Facebook, just at Ray Kelly Fitness. So just RayKelleyFitness. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sort of active on that sort of stuff. The Facebook stuff's generally fairly community sort of based, tips and things like that. I guess the Twitter's a bit more political. I just find it's a better platform for that. I think it's a smarter platform for that. You know, like I think there's some really good, intelligent people on there. And not that Facebook's just more, you kick about sort of thing. So, we'll have our like just nice fluffy stories on there. Whereas if I'm going to get brutal on anything, it's usually on Twitter. So, but I'm pretty easy going, but sometimes I'll just have a bit of a vent, and yeah, I welcome any challenges. Don't worry, so I don't mind. But only because like it's so important that these topics get discussed. So just to give you an idea, things like racism, like a lot of people think racism shouldn't be discussed, but it has to be discussed. Like, and that's one thing I'm passionate about. Like, otherwise it just goes underground, and it gets discussed, and all these myths get perpetuated. If you want to bring a racist undone, give them rope. Give them more airtime so that we can pick them apart. We can show what they're saying. It just doesn't make sense. It's the best way. So, but that's the same thing for all the health-related topics as well. I think like give everyone a voice. Like once you get people confident and talking, you'll soon work out who's got holes in their stories and who doesn't. That's for sure.
Yeah, mate. You talked about the people's perception of things, and coming from New Zealand, and New Zealand Day is Waitangi Day, and I was driving home on Friday night, and this debate's going on about, well, should Australia Day be moved? Should there be an Aboriginal Acknowledgement Day? With the first few weeks I came here, there was the National Aboriginal and I think it's like Islanders or something Day, Torres Strait and stuff. Yeah, and they had a parade down the street, and I thought, oh, that's cool. And everybody else is going, oh, they're holding up the street. I thought, well, what are you talking about? And so, where do you stand on moving an Australia Day, or changing the name, or moving it around, or acknowledging things?
I'm open to anything on that, but I think that the big issue is that Australians don't know their history. Yeah. So the history of Australia, the problem is it was very open up until about 1880. And then after Federation, everything in 1901, it got cleansed to be, oh no, the English came here and developed, and they got on really well with the Aborigines, and it's and it was just like, there was some people, some bad blackfellas who did bad things, and we had to sort of clean them up. But overall, it was all good. Nothing can be further from the truth. Like there's been a long history of state-sanctioned murders, massacres, and then even just throughout the 1900s, like laws set to control Aboriginal people, where they can live, whether they can travel, whether they can marry, like all these sorts of things. And we've got people alive today who lived through that sort of stuff. And, they like modern Australians say, oh, I won't have to dig up the past. Nothing's been dug up. It's never been buried by Aboriginal people. It's been passed on, all the stories, and you wouldn't ever have a celebration of any kind on a day that's associated with the Holocaust. You know what I mean? You would never do that. It just doesn't make sense, And a lot of people are fixed on, January 26th as being, the start of Australia. When, like, some people think it's when Captain Cook arrived. No, it wasn't. Some people think, it's the start of the country. No, it wasn't. It was the start of the ships that came in, and even that I think was a few days before. But there's so much conjecture, and it also only has become a holiday more recently. So it hasn't been this long-standing historical thing. And a lot of people will say, oh, Aboriginal people have got all these, like they've got Sorry Day and all that. So what they're saying, first of all, who celebrates those sorts of things? But they're saying, oh, so on the day that the Prime Minister said, sorry for the government stealing your children, you're supposed to celebrate that and be happy. That's the problem. Aboriginal people are supposed to be happy that they're getting at least that. You know what I mean? Like, are you kidding? Like, this is why this discussion has to be made. And like I said, I don't mind. They can keep it, change it, whatever they like. But it is. But Australian people need to know the history of this country, and I'm a proud Australian. I'm a very proud Australian. But too often it gets like people want to discuss, well, if you're talking about that, you're unpatriotic and you hate the country. No, you can identify historical facts and discuss historical facts and still be proud of the country that you're in today and the development that's come to that. You can still do that. So it's not an either or, you know what I mean? Like it's, but look, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of history that Australians don't know, and a lot of culture that was killed off. This is why I love going out to Burke and Brewarren, and there's still good culture out there. And, you know, it's just, it's a very rich area culturally. And whereas where I grew up, you know, like people were just, well, no one was allowed to speak their languages, or no, not allowed to dance ceremonies or anything like that. So it was all just after generation. And that was the other thing, like, you know, up until the 1960s, late 1960s, Aboriginal people didn't have that sort of equality of pays and that right to vote and all these sorts of things that come with it. So they've had to learn how to work within that system as well. So there's always going to be hiccups and hurdles within that, because there's also that sort of that racism that still lingers with some of the older people that pass down to their children. You know, some of the misconceptions, like, say, alcohol abuse. If you have a look, like when people talk about Aboriginal health, they'll always bring up, if they haven't lived around there, they'll always bring up alcohol abuse. But when you have a look at the stats from the government census stats, you know, there's not much difference between abuse of alcohol between Aboriginal community and the rest of Australia. There's not actually. I think it's 2014, 2015, the ones I saw, it was about 2% lower or something for Aboriginal community. If you're speaking remote, that's different, and that's different social issues. But you can't just brand, you know, a whole group of people from all over the country as having alcohol problems purely because it's the stereotype, you know, just based on something you've seen on TV for remote Australia. But also housing. You know, in Australia, we always hear about this, you know, houses getting burnt down and torn around by Aboriginal people. But there was a really good study done by, I think it's Health Habitat, and they looked at something like 8,200 houses and found that only 8% of the damage was done by the tenant. And just remember, this is community housing, so I'm sure it'd be more, you know, within other communities around the country. But 70% had it was just poor maintenance. Just they weren't kept up by the owners of the houses. They're the government groups or whatever that were looking after. And I think like 16% had a working kitchen and all these sort of things. And they all contribute to health outcomes. Yet we'll sort of hear that, but these are the facts, you know. It's crazy. Once you start digging, it's amazing where the hole goes. And I only deal with facts. I only just deal with just purely what's there, not people's stories, but, you know, I've seen this stuff for myself. And even with, say, like sexual abuse, you'll hear about sexual abuse in Aboriginal communities. I've spoken recently with someone who works in family services, and they've said the big area is actually non-Indigenous people. The big growth area is non-Indigenous partners sexually abusing Aboriginal children. And you won't see that in the headlines, you know. But, you know, I saw a story whilst I was working out at Burke, I think maybe the Sun Herald, where they spoke to 2 local girls about sexual abuse, and then this was historical, but they tried to make out that Burke had a problem, and they linked it to Tennant Creek, where that young child got sexually abused. So there was no link between these stories at all, but they just tried to link it in images on the same page. And I actually spoke to the head of police out there, and because he'd been saying at a presentation that in Burke, you know, the crime stats are down the best they've been in 30 years. And I said, well, I saw this story recently on that, and he's on sexual abuse. And he said, he goes, yeah, no, that journalist come and saw me, and I told her that there was not a problem in town, but she just went down the street and just found some people to talk to. And so she just spoke to a couple of girls that were sitting around, you know, adults, and just spoke about their past, and they told their stories about, you know, many years ago, but they linked the story to make out like there was a current problem there.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we see, and that's why people have these impressions. So that's why you've got to really just check it out for yourself.
Yeah, even on my doorstep here in Ballina, we walk along a wee path that's got a number of murals that sort of explains the area, but there's a little sand dune that separates the beach that we're on and the beach over, and a group of people came down from Queensland and shot up a whole settlement, and nobody was held accountable for that. And like, there's a memorial there, but you just sort of look at that and go, "Wow, that's that was." You can see why people have a bit of a put up, and there's plenty of stories like that in New Zealand with the pioneering groups and the military groups taking out Māori tribes, but. And we know about that in New Zealand, and that's why Waitangi Day has so much conjecture. But when you come across here and you sort of hear these, this is only just sort of coming to the surface. You go, wow, there's a lot of work to do, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, and like the fact is that the settlement started in Sydney. And they spread out along the rivers, like they had people go out there and they would have people given land. So basically the settlers would go out and they would take part of the land, especially close to water, of course, which is obviously where the Aboriginal people were living as well. If, they would be eating the kangaroos and taking the water and using the land to graze. So they'd be using the Aboriginal people's land, but the Aboriginal and eating their food. But if the Aboriginal people speared one of their sheep or cattle, they'd be shot. And not just one, they wanted to make an impact. They'd go shoot 20, 30 people, and no one got in trouble for that. And it was basically, we have to make sure people know. They did nothing different. Like, it was their land. And people will say, oh, no, it wasn't. Well, the documents will show that back in the 1820s, 1830s, the government of the time, like the British government and even the governors over here, acknowledged that Aboriginal people were here first, and it was their land, and that was put in, and that was why the Wick versus Queensland case in the 90s was such a big issue, because Aboriginal people wanted access to lands, and the people who had the land leases didn't want them on there, and didn't realise, the government themselves didn't even realise that when those were written way back, it actually says in there that Aboriginal people should have access to all that land as well. That because they are the people who were here beforehand. And so, what's John Howard do? He wants to change the laws then. But because he said the pendulum had swung too far in Aboriginal people's favour. It didn't swing anywhere. That's just where it was. It just wasn't, they were just ripped off for many years. So it depends on how you look at it. But it's crazy that, people can think like that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, mate, look, don't even get me started on that stuff. It's just crazy. But the good thing is people are more open to learning these days, and they're learning more. And social media is great for that. But so many stories, like, geez, and traveling around, you meet a lot of people, and they'll tell you stories of massacres in their areas. Like, say, Brewarrina, the famous one there is Hospital Creek. And, basically 2 men from a different group had killed a cow. But the story from the settlers was, no, they kidnapped one of their workers. This guy was never identified and never found, or said he was retrieved or anything. So there's no name to this bloke that was apparently kidnapped. But they went upriver and they went to a different group. They didn't really care, because all Aboriginal people were the same back then, they thought. And they killed anywhere between 200 and 400 people. That's women, children, and men that were just innocent. They had nothing to do with stealing that cattle at all, nothing. They were just set up camp on the river. They just come in with their guns, bang, bang, wipe out a whole group. And there's plenty of stories. There's actually a map being done now. One of the universities were setting it up, so you might want to check that out. And it goes through all the massacres across Australia in red dots, and there's a lot of red dots. Like I said, this isn't about guilt. See, people get caught up in, oh, it wasn't me. Like, no one's saying it's you. Like, it's not about guilt. It's not about blame. It's about acknowledgement, and it's just not acknowledged. And if it is, it's always like, oh, that was long ago. Yeah, like World War One. We celebrate that every year. Anzac Day and that. So that was long ago. Or Australia Day, that was 1788. But it's crazy. They go, oh, it's long ago. Get over it. Get over it. We wouldn't say that to people in the Bali bombing, would we? So.
No, you're right. You're right, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk, and we've covered so many diverse topics that has been wicked, and I'm sure you could go on and on. You've lived an amazing and intriguing life, and I look forward to seeing the sort of things that you come up with in the future. I'll be sure to link your details in the show notes, but do you have anything that you'd like to leave people with, a quote, a thought, or an ask of the audience?
Oh, look, just pretty much, we need to keep learning and don't just accept what you've been told. Like, I mean, it's good. You don't want to be just denying everything. You don't want to be one of those sort of people. But, if there's something you don't know or don't understand, just read. It's very easy these days with the internet. But read quality, and certainly if it's your go, learn how to read research properly. So how to identify what's quality research over the chaff sort of stuff, and because there's a lot of crap out there. There really is a lot of crap. You can't just believe something because research says it, because there's a lot of crap out there so that you've got to filter through. But that said, there's some really awesome stuff, and also never discount testimonials and things like that, because that's what inspires a lot of research. Like people always go against anecdotal evidence, say you can't take that on board. Well, you have to. It's what drives research. It's what gives researchers ideas. You know what I mean? Otherwise, we'd just be doing the same thing over and over again. But just keep learning. It's a fantastic world we live in. It's a very rich world that for knowledge. And we're blessed to have a great way to keep continuing our education.
Beautiful, mate. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and hopefully you get on that bike again soon.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.